And now, aviation weather around Alaska. Greetings. I'm National Weather Service meteorologist Peter Chan, bringing you your Alaska aviation weather as we go into Sunday and Monday of the early week ahead. Don't forget, though, if you're heading to bed here later this Saturday evening, set your clock back 1 hour or do that Sunday morning. Remember, we're heading back to standard time, so clocks get set back 1 hour. Officially, that occurs at 2 a.m. This Saturday night. Looking at the weather here for Sunday morning, we got a few things going on in terms of pressure features. A low that's going to be riding just off of the Panhandle coast will combine with a weak low off the Kenai coast and be situated over the north central Gulf later this weekend, early next week. Low pressure out over the western Bering will continue working its way eastward and approach Kuskokwim Bay by very early Tuesday morning. And then a big high sitting up over the Arctic Ocean will increase winds along the Arctic coast as we go through the day. Sunday, we do expect some gale force winds there. Kaktovik over toward Utqiagvik, which will cause at least some turbulence. And if there's any low cloudiness, we could have some lower ceilings as well. More importantly, though, as we get into next week, eventually as the low gets up here into Kuskokwim Bay, it's not going to be very strong, but the overall pattern is going to shift to southwesterly flow coming in across the Aleutians, Alaska Peninsula, up into the southern mainland. And this is going to bring a stormier pattern in the week ahead as we get probably by along, especially Wednesday into Thursday. So stay tuned to later forecasts. Sunday afternoon, IFR conditions persist here along the intercoastal mountains and southern portions of the Panhandle. We still have IFR in parts of the Gulf in through Prince William Sound, extending up toward Windy Pass and on up into the western interior. Along a frontal band ahead of that low in the western Bering, we expect a band of IFR conditions, and also back out toward parts of the eastern central Aleutians. Monday morning, still IFR intercoastal areas here of the Panhandle along the northeastern Gulf Coast, including areas especially west of Gustavus, Yakutat into Prince William Sound, and even on over toward Anchorage. Areas up along the middle Yukon Valley into the western Brooks Range, and then a broad area of IFR conditions are expected along the southwest coast, Kuskokwim, Bristol Bay, westward to St. Paul, and then down across especially the lower two-thirds there of the Alaska Peninsula. By Monday afternoon, IFR conditions are expected from the Chugach Mountains and Prince William Sound eastward along the northeastern Gulf Coast and northern parts of the Panhandle. IFR pretty widespread from the lower Yukon Delta through Nunavik Island. Again, Kuskokwim, Bristol Bays into the northern part of the Alaska Peninsula, and then way out toward the central western Aleutians, we expect rather broad area of IFR as we start to see the moisture pulling in with stronger winds aloft. So here, Anatuvik Pass on Sunday, we expect MVFR conditions to generally be the rule there in the Brooks Range. Adigan Pass, also MVFR. South and west toward the west arm of the Alaska Range, IFR at Lake Clark and Merrill early in the day Sunday, giving way to MVFR conditions. Rainy Pass should generally remain IFR during the day on Sunday. Windy Pass, MVFR possibly becoming IFR. Keep an eye on that one. Isabel, MVFR becoming VFR. And then further east, Mentasta Pass, also MVFR becoming VFR on Sunday. Tanita Pass, Copper River Basin, generally holding in MVFR conditions. Portage Pass looks to be socked in with IFR conditions, including all of Prince William Sound during the day on Sunday. And then in the far northern Panhandle, Chilkoot and White should see MVFR conditions during the day on Sunday. Freezing levels at the surface run along the eastern Russian coast, dropping to near St. Matthew, just south of Nunavik Island and around Kuskokwim, Bristol Bays, coming back up along the inner Cook Channel inlet there, and then up along just the inner, the coastal, base of the coastal mountains going into the northeastern Gulf Coast and in the northwest Canada. Highest freezing levels aloft, southern Panhandle, height of Gouai above 6,000 feet, and then also an area of higher freezing levels aloft, upwards of 6,000 feet here back toward the central Aleutians. In response to low pressure out here with a front working its way northeastward. And then we have the one low too also sitting out here that's going to ride up along the outer Panhandle coastline and merge with a weaker low over the northwestern Gulf by the time we get into Monday. So greatest threat for icing on Sunday, some moderate icing possible in areas of the southern and northern panhandle, generally above 6,000 feet. As we get further up along the northern Gulf Coast, we could see areas above 4,000 feet, and then in through the interior, generally above 2,000 feet. The air is colder here. We do have some pockets of light snow along the Yukon River, back up along areas of the northwest coast there along the Chukchi Sea. And then the frontal system out here and through the central Bering, we expect along and ahead of that, there's potential for icing above 4,000 feet or so. In another area way back down here toward the central Aleutians, above 8,000 feet, where those freezing levels aloft are a bit higher. Looking at the jet stream winds, 30,000 feet. We have high pressure sitting here over western central Canada, so we have that circulation like this. And then back to the west, we have a band of stronger westerly winds with a 125-knot jet core here near and just north of the western Aleutians. This pattern, though, by the time we get into early next week, into, say, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, we're going to see a broad, strong southwest flow set up like this, which means that's going to pull moisture up from the Gulf and from the North Pacific. It's going to lend toward a stormier pattern across areas of the Aleutians, the Alaska Peninsula, and the southern mainland, so stay tuned to later forecasts. And at 9,000-foot winds or 700 millibars Sunday, we see a broad belt of winds of 40 to 60 knots, generally out of the west-northwest, with a bit of a low circulation here out over the Gulf, and then down to 3,000 feet. On Sunday, we find that strongest winds here up along the Arctic coast, areas of the North Slope, in excess of 40 knots, even up near 50 knots here near and west of Kaktovik. We also have some winds aloft, 35 knots here coming up along Porcupine River, Yukon Flats area, and then back out here across the Bering, we have a band of 40, 50 knot winds along that frontal system that's closer to the surface. And then also back here along the Aleutians, 50 to 60 knot winds. So widespread, considerable moderate turbulence is possible, especially up along the Arctic coast, surface to 3,000 feet, areas of the western Brooks Range and North Slope. South side of the Brooks Range and along and north of the Yukon River into the Yukon Flats, surface to 4,000 feet, some considerable moderate turbulence. Also some areas with that low coming up along the outer coast of the Panhandle, surface to 6,000 feet. Southern parts of the Panhandle could see moderate turbulence. And then a long swath of turbulence from areas of the Aleutian Chain on up into the Alaska Peninsula, Bristol Bay, Shelikof Strait, from the surface to 3,000, coming upwards to 4,000 and even 5,000 feet in areas around Kodiak Island.